I never thought a fire hydrant would become the hill I'd die on. But here I was, standing in my front yard in Phoenix, Arizona, staring at the faded yellow metal post that had somehow become public enemy number one, according to the Sagebrush Hills Homeowners Association. My name is Vincent Jenkins, and I'd lived in this cookie-cutter neighborhood for 3 years without incident. I worked as a civil engineer for the city, which made the irony of what was about to unfold even more absurd. The fire hydrant in question sat at the corner of my property, technically on the easement between my yard and the street, surrounded by some overgrown desert grass and a few tumbleweeds that had decided to make it their home during the particularly windy spring we'd been having. It was a Tuesday morning when I found the letter taped to my front door. Not mailed, mind you, but physically taped there with enough packing tape to suggest someone really wanted to make sure I got the message. The envelope was cream-colored with the HOA logo printed in the corner, a ridiculous design featuring a saguaro cactus intertwined with a gavel, as if the desert itself demanded order. Inside, the letter was typed in aggressive bold font. Violation notice. Property owner Vincent Jenkins, 4782 Sagebrush Lane. It has come to the attention of the Homeowners Association Board that you have failed to maintain the fire hydrant easement on your property. Debris, vegetation, and obstructions are present, creating a safety hazard and violating Section 14.7 of the HOA bylaws. You have 5 days to clear the area completely and maintain a 3-foot radius of clearance around the hydrant. Failure to comply will result in fines of $50 per day. Respectfully, Patricia Moreland, HOA President. I read the letter 3 times, each time feeling my blood pressure rise a little higher. The fire hydrant had been exactly as it was now when I'd bought the house. The inspection hadn't mentioned it. The city hadn't mentioned it. And in 3 years, the HOA had never mentioned it. I walked outside and looked at the hydrant again. Sure, there was some grass around it and a tumbleweed had gotten caught there, but calling it a safety hazard was like calling a speed bump Mount Everest. I pulled out my phone and called my buddy Marcus, who lived 2 streets over in the same development. Hey, did you get any weird letters from the HOA about fire hydrants? Fire hydrants? No, man. Why, what's up? Patricia Moreland is on my case about clearing around the hydrant by my yard. Says I've got 5 days or they start fining me. Marcus laughed. Patricia, the pain strikes again. She's been president for like 6 months and has been finding violations everywhere. My neighbor got cited for having the wrong shade of brown mailbox. Brown, Vincent. She measured it with a color wheel. You're kidding. I wish I was. Just clear the hydrant, man. It's not worth the fight. But something about the letter bothered me. I'd spent years working with city codes and ordinances, and my engineer brain couldn't let things go when they didn't make sense. That afternoon, I drove to City Hall and spent an hour in the planning department reviewing easement laws and fire code requirements. What I found was interesting. The fire hydrant sat on a public utility easement, not my property. The city was responsible for maintaining access to it, not me. The HOA had exactly 0 authority over public utility easements. Armed with this knowledge and printed copies of the relevant city codes, I felt pretty confident about ignoring Patricia's letter. That confidence lasted exactly 3 days. On Friday evening, I came home from work to find not 1 but 3 letters taped to my door. The first was another notice from Patricia, this time with second notice stamped across the top in red ink. The second was a formal fine notification, $50, dated for that day. The third was a letter informing me that if I didn't comply by Sunday evening, The HOA would hire someone to clear the area and bill me for it, plus an administrative fee of $200. I was done being diplomatic. I sat down at my computer and wrote a detailed response citing the municipal codes, the easement documentation, and the fact that the HOA had no legal authority over the space in question. I printed it, put it in an envelope, and drove to Patricia Moreland's house, which according to the HOA directory was on Desert Vista Drive, the street where all the larger, more expensive homes were located. Her house was exactly what I expected. Pristine. Beige stucco with darker brown trim, professionally maintained landscaping with color-coordinated rocks, and perfectly spaced desert plants. Her mailbox probably matched the HOA specifications to the millimeter. I rang the doorbell and waited. Patricia Moreland opened the door and looked me up and down with the kind of expression usually reserved for finding dog mess on your shoe. She was probably in her mid-50s, with severely straightened blonde hair, too much makeup, and a pantsuit that looked like it cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice dripping with the fake politeness that middle-aged women weaponize better than anyone. "Mrs. Moreland, I'm Vincent Jenkins from Sagebrush Lane. I wanted to discuss the violation notices about the fire hydrant." "Oh yes, Mr. Jenkins. Have you completed the required maintenance?" "No, madam, I haven't." "Because as I explain in this letter, the fire hydrant is on a public easement, not my property. The city is responsible for it, not me. The HOA doesn't have authority over public utilities." I held out the envelope. She took it with 2 fingers like it might be contaminated, opened it, and spent maybe 5 seconds scanning the first paragraph before looking back up at me. "Mr. Jenkins, the HOA bylaws are very clear. All property owners are responsible for maintaining the appearance of their property and adjacent areas. The fire hydrant is adjacent to your property, therefore it falls under your responsibility. But it's not my property. It's a public easement. I have the documentation right there." "I don't need to read your documentation. The bylaws are what govern this community, and you agreed to follow them when you purchased your home. If you don't clear that area by Sunday, you will be fined, and we will proceed with remediation and billing. Good evening." She closed the door in my face. I stood there for a moment, stunned by the sheer audacity. Then I walked back to my truck, drove home, and did something that in retrospect was probably not my finest moment, but felt absolutely right at the time. I went to bed angry and woke up Saturday morning with a plan that would make everything so much worse. The fire hydrant was already barely visible under some grass and one tumbleweed. If Patricia wanted to play hardball about something that wasn't even my responsibility, fine. I'd give her something to really complain about. I spent Saturday morning at Home Depot. I bought 10 bales of straw, 5 bags of decorative river rocks, 3 large terracotta pots, 2 rolls of chicken wire, and various other landscaping supplies. Then I stopped by a garden center and picked up some fast-growing ornamental grasses and a couple of small shrubs. By Saturday afternoon, my front corner looked like a nature preserve. I'd built up the area around the fire hydrant with straw and dirt, planted the ornamental grasses in a thick cluster, positioned the large terracotta pots strategically, and added the river rocks in artistic patterns. The fire hydrant was now completely invisible unless you knew exactly where to look, buried under what appeared to be a thoughtfully designed desert landscape feature. I stepped back to admire my work. It actually looked good, better than the bare hydrant had looked. And technically, I hadn't violated any HOA rules about landscaping. I'd enhanced my property's curb appeal. My neighbor Carol, an elderly woman who'd lived in the neighborhood since it was built, came out to check her mailbox and stopped to stare at my handiwork. "Vincent, honey, what on earth are you doing?" "Landscaping," I said cheerfully. "That's where the fire hydrant is." "Is it? I don't see a fire hydrant." "Do you see a fire hydrant, Carol?" She looked at me, then at the mound of decorative straw and plants, then back at me. A slow smile spread across her face. "You know what? I don't see a fire hydrant at all. I see a lovely garden feature. Patricia is going to lose her mind." "That's kind of the point." Carol laughed, actually laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from her in the 3 years I'd lived there. "Good for you." Someone needs to stand up to that woman. She tried to fine me for having my garage door open for more than 4 hours, said it was unsightly. I was sorting through 40 years of belongings after my husband passed. She fined you for grieving, she tried. I told her where she could stick her fine, but she's been leaving me alone since then, probably because I'm old and she's afraid I'll keel over and make her look bad. Carol's expression turned more serious. "Be careful though, Vincent. Patricia doesn't like losing and she's got the whole board in her pocket. They vote however she tells them to." "I'll keep that in mind." "Thanks, Carol." Sunday came and went without incident. I spent the day inside, half expecting Patricia to show up, but she didn't. Monday morning, I went to work as usual, dealt with permit reviews and infrastructure plans, and came home to find my mailbox stuffed with papers. 6 different violation notices. 1 for unauthorized landscaping, 1 for obstruction of public safety equipment, 1 for unapproved garden installation, 1 for improper use of easement space, 1 for failure to maintain visibility of community infrastructure, and 1 that just said willful defiance of HOA directives. The total fines added up to $850, with more accruing daily. I called Marcus again. "Okay, so I might have escalated things. What did you do?" "I buried the fire hydrant under a bunch of landscaping." There was silence on the other end. "Then, Vincent, man, why would you do that?" "Because Patricia wouldn't listen to reason. The hydrant isn't my responsibility. It's on public property. The HOA can't legally enforce this. Legal and what Patricia thinks she can do are 2 very different things. You need to get a lawyer." "For a fire hydrant dispute, that seems excessive." "Trust me, get a lawyer. This isn't about the hydrant anymore. This is about Patricia's ego." Marcus was right, but I wasn't ready to spend money on a lawyer yet. Instead, I decided to go over Patricia's head. Tuesday morning, I called the city's fire department non-emergency line and explained the situation. They transferred me to Fire Marshal Rodriguez, who listened to my story with what sounded like barely suppressed amusement. "So let me get this straight," Rodriguez said. "Your HOA president is demanding you maintain clearance around a fire hydrant that's on city property, and when you refused, you buried it under landscaping." "That's an accurate summary, yes, Mr. Jenkins. I appreciate the creativity, but you're going to need to remove that landscaping. The fire department does need clear access to all hydrants, even if it's not technically your responsibility to maintain it." "But the HOA doesn't have authority over city property, right?" "Correct. They can't fine you for not maintaining it. However, we can cite you for obstructing it. Which I'm not going to do, because this is hilarious, and Patricia Moreland has been a thorn in our side for years. She keeps calling us about code violations that don't exist, but I do need you to remove the obstruction. What if the HOA tries to fine me again once I do?" "Then you refer them to the city attorney's office. The easement is city property, period. They have no say in it. I'll send you an email confirming that in writing. You can show that to your HOA. But seriously, remove the landscaping. If there's a fire and crews can't access that hydrant quickly, it becomes a real problem." He had a point. I didn't actually want to obstruct emergency services. I just wanted to make a point to Patricia. Okay, I'll remove it this weekend. Appreciate it. And Mr. Jenkins. Off the record, I'd love to see the look on Patricia's face when you show her the city's email. I thanked him and hung up, feeling better about the situation. I had documentation from the fire marshal, proof that the HOA was overstepping, and a clear path to ending this nonsense. Wednesday afternoon, I received the email from Fire Marshal Rodriguez. It was beautifully official, with the city seal and everything, confirming that fire hydrant easements were city property, that maintenance was the city's responsibility, and that HOAs had no authority to enforce regulations regarding them. He'd also included the relevant municipal codes as attachments. I printed 3 copies, one for my records, one for Patricia, and one for the HOA board. Thursday morning before work, I drove back to Patricia's house and slipped the envelope through her mail slot. I didn't want another door-in-face conversation. The documentation spoke for itself. I should have known it wouldn't be that simple. Thursday evening, I came home to find a bright orange notice staked in my front yard. Not taped to my door, not in my mailbox, but a literal sign on a metal stake planted in my grass. It read "Property in violation of HOA bylaws" in huge black letters, with a list of my supposed infractions printed below. I pulled it out of the ground and marched straight back to my truck. If Patricia wanted to play the public shaming game, we could play. This time when I rang her doorbell, she opened it already scowling. "Mr. Jenkins, I'm going to have to ask you to stop harassing me at my home." "Harassing you? You planted a violation sign in my yard like I'm some kind of criminal. I gave you documentation from the fire marshal proving the HOA has no authority over that easement. That email is irrelevant. The bylaws are clear. The bylaws don't supersede municipal law, Mrs. Moreland. You can't enforce rules about property you don't control." The HOA board voted unanimously to proceed with fines and remediation. You now owe the association $1,300 in accumulated fines. If you don't pay and clear the violation by Monday, we'll place a lien on your property. A lien? She was threatening a lien over a fire hydrant that wasn't even my responsibility. "You can't place a lien without a court order," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "We absolutely can. It's in the bylaws, Section 22, Subsection 4. All unpaid fines and assessments can result in a lien after 30 days. We're expediting the process due to the safety violation." There is no safety violation. The fire marshal confirmed that. The fire marshal doesn't govern HOA policy. I do. Well, the board does, but I'm the president. "Good evening, Mr. Jenkins." Another door slam. I sat in my truck for a solid 5 minutes, gripping the steering wheel and trying to calm down. Patricia wasn't just power hungry, she was delusional. She genuinely believed the HOA bylaws gave her more authority than actual municipal government. When I got home, I did what I should have done days ago. I called a lawyer. My insurance company had a legal referral service, and they connected me with Sarah Chen, a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. "Mr. Jenkins," she said after I explained the situation, "I need to ask you something. When you buried the fire hydrant under landscaping, were you aware that could be considered obstruction?" "Yes, but I was frustrated. The fire marshal already told me to remove it, and I will this weekend. That's not really the issue anymore." "What is the issue?" "Patricia Moreland is threatening to put a lien on my house over fines for something that isn't my responsibility, and that the HOA has no authority over. I have documentation from the fire department proving this. HOAs can be tricky. They do have the authority to place liens for unpaid fines if it's written into the bylaws, and you signed off on them when you purchased the property. However, If the fines themselves are invalid, which they sound like they are, then the lien would also be invalid. Did you review the bylaws before you bought? Honestly, I skimmed them. They seemed pretty standard. No weird paint colors, keep your grass mowed, don't run a business out of your garage, that kind of thing. That's what most people do, unfortunately. Here's what I recommend. First, remove the landscaping around the fire hydrant like the fire marshal requested. Document it with photos and timestamps. Second, send a formal letter to the HOA board, not just Patricia, citing the municipal codes and the fire marshal's email and demanding they rescind all fines. Third, inform them that if they proceed with a lien, you'll file suit for harassment and abuse of authority. That usually gets their attention. Will it actually stop them? It should. But if Patricia is as stubborn as she sounds, she might push forward anyway, which would be incredibly stupid on her part because she'd lose. The question is whether you want to spend the time and money fighting this on principle. How much are we talking, if it goes to court? Could be a few $1,000s in legal fees, though you'd likely recover them when you win. But most HOA disputes settle before that. Nobody wants the bad publicity or the legal costs. I thanked her, paid her consultation fee, and hung up feeling slightly better. At least I had a plan. Friday after work, I started removing the landscaping around the fire hydrant. It actually felt a little sad dismantling something I'd worked hard on, even if it had been created out of spite. Carol came out again to watch. Giving up? She asked. Fire marshal asked me to clear it. He agreed the HOA is overstepping, but he needs the hydrant accessible. That's fair. So what's next? Lawyer letter, then probably a fight. Carol nodded thoughtfully. You know, I've lived here for 18 years, seen a lot of HOA presidents come and go. Patricia is the worst I've ever dealt with. She acts like she owns the whole neighborhood. Why did people vote for her? Most people didn't vote at all. HOA elections are usually pretty low turnout. She ran unopposed and got maybe 30 votes out of 300 homes. Then she stacked the board with her friends. Now she does whatever she wants. That was depressing but not surprising. By Saturday afternoon, the fire hydrant was clear again, standing alone in its little patch of dirt and grass. I took about 50 photos from different angles, noting the date and time on each. Sunday, I drafted the letter Sarah had recommended. It was professional but firm, citing all relevant laws and demanding the immediate rescission of all fines. I sent copies to Patricia via certified mail, to each board member individually, and to the HOA's management company. Then I waited. Monday came and went. Tuesday came and went. No response. Wednesday, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Vincent Jenkins? A man's voice, professional but stressed. Yes, who's calling? My name is Robert Sterling. I'm on the HOA board treasurer position. Mr. Jenkins, I want to apologize for this situation. I received your letter, and I've reviewed the documentation from the fire marshal. You're absolutely right. The HOA has no authority over that easement, and Patricia had no business fining you. I was so surprised I almost dropped the phone. So you're rescinding the fines? I'm trying to. I called an emergency board meeting for tonight to discuss it, but I wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia is furious. She's threatening to resign if we don't back her up, and frankly, that might not be the worst outcome. She's been making decisions without board approval and creating problems everywhere. What kind of problems? Besides you, she's fined 13 different homeowners in the past month alone. Most of them are bogus violations like yours. People are talking about mass lawsuits. The HOA's insurance company is not happy. I've been treasurer for 5 years, and I've never seen anything like this. So what happens at tonight's meeting? If I can get the votes, we rescind your fines and all the others Patricia issued without proper authority. We might also vote to remove her as president. But I need to ask you something. Would you be willing to attend the meeting? If homeowners see that we're taking these complaints seriously, it might prevent bigger legal problems down the road. What time? 7 o'clock at the community center. I'll be there. The Sagebrush Hills Community Center was a squat beige building that looked like every other community center in Arizona. Decorative desert landscaping out front, a parking lot that was never quite big enough, and interior lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. I arrived at 6:45 and was surprised to find the parking lot already almost full. Inside, the meeting room was packed. Carol was there, along with at least 40 other homeowners I vaguely recognized from around the neighborhood. Everyone was holding papers, violation notices, fines, letters from Patricia. Robert Sterling found me near the door. He was a tall man in his 60s, graying hair, tired eyes, wearing khakis and a golf shirt. "Mr. Jenkins, thank you for coming. This is a much bigger turnout than I expected. Looks like Patricia has been busy. You have no idea. Once word got out about tonight's meeting, people started contacting me all day. Everyone has a complaint." At 7 sharp, the board members filed to a table at the front of the room. There were 5 of them. Robert, 2 middle-aged men I didn't recognize, an older woman with kind eyes, and Patricia. Patricia looked like she was ready for war. She wore a crimson blazer over a black dress, her makeup even more severe than before, her expression carved from stone. She scanned the room with obvious disdain and banged a gavel on the table. "This emergency meeting of the Sagebrush Hills HOA board is now in session. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that these meetings are for board business only. Homeowner comments are not on the agenda." Robert immediately raised his hand. "Actually, Patricia, I called this meeting specifically to address homeowner concerns. We need to discuss the recent violation notices. Those violations are valid and board approved." "No, they're not. Most of them were issued without board knowledge or approval. That's not how we operate." The room erupted in murmurs. Patricia banged the gavel again. "Order! I am the president of this association, and I have the authority to issue violations as I see fit." "No," Robert said firmly, "you don't. The bylaws require board approval for fines exceeding $300, and many of these are well over that. They also require board approval for any enforcement action regarding property that isn't actually owned by the HOA. I don't need to justify my decisions to you or anyone else here." One of the other board members, a stocky man with glasses, spoke up. "Patricia, we've been getting complaints all week. The fire hydrant situation alone is a legal nightmare. The city has confirmed we have no authority there. We need to rescind those fines immediately." "We will do no such thing." That homeowner deliberately defied my direct orders. "They weren't orders," I said from the audience. Everyone turned to look at me. "You issued violations for something that wasn't my responsibility and that you had no authority over. The fire marshal confirmed it in writing." Patricia's face flushed red. "You are out of order. Sit down." "Actually," Robert said, "I invited Mr. Jenkins to speak. Vincent, would you please come forward and explain the situation for the record?" I walked to the front, very aware of 40 pairs of eyes on me. I laid out the entire timeline. The initial violation notice, my research into the easement laws, Patricia's refusal to consider the documentation, the fire marshal's email, and the threat of a lien. When I finished, at least a dozen hands went up from the audience. Robert pointed to a woman in the 3rd row. "Yes, please. I got fined $300 for having a vegetable garden in my backyard. My backyard. Patricia said it was unsightly, but it's behind a 6-foot fence. No one can even see it except from my own house. Another hand. I got fined for parking my truck in my driveway overnight. I've done that for 4 years without issue. Patricia said commercial vehicles aren't allowed, but it's just my personal truck. More hands. More stories. A man fined for flying an American flag the wrong size. A woman fined for having solar panels installed even though Arizona has right to solar laws. A couple fined for having their adult son's car parked in their driveway while he visited for a week. The pattern was clear. Patricia had gone on a power trip, finding violations everywhere, most of them either petty or completely invalid. Patricia tried to maintain control. These violations are all legitimate according to the bylaws. If you people would just follow the rules, there wouldn't be problems. You people. Carol's voice rang out from the back. Patricia, some of us have lived here longer than you've been president. This neighborhood was fine before you started treating it like your personal kingdom. The room erupted in applause. Patricia's face went from red to purple. She stood up so fast her chair fell backward. I have worked tirelessly to maintain the standards of this community. If you don't appreciate that, then perhaps you should all move somewhere without rules. Robert stood as well. Patricia, I'm calling for a vote. First, to rescind all violation fines issued in the past 60 days pending individual board review. Second, to implement a new policy requiring board approval before any violation fine is issued. Third, to remove you as HOA president effective immediately. You can't do that. Actually, I can. It's in the bylaws. Any board member can call for a vote of no confidence in the president. It requires a majority of the board, and I believe we have that. Tom, Susan, Jack, how do you vote? The 3 other board members all said aye without hesitation. Patricia grabbed her purse. Fine. You want to run this association into the ground. Go ahead, I resign. All of you are going to regret this. She stormed out. The room fell silent for a moment, then someone started clapping. Within seconds, everyone was applauding. Robert looked shell-shocked but relieved. Okay, he said once the applause died down. We have a lot of work to do. All fines issued in the past 60 days are hereby rescinded pending review. If you believe you were wrongly fined, please submit a complaint form to the board. We'll review each case individually. This is going to take time, so please be patient with us. We're going to get this fixed. The meeting continued for another hour as people shared their concerns and the board took notes. By the time I left, it was almost 9:30, and I felt like I just watched a small revolution. Carol caught up with me in the parking lot. Well, that was exciting. That's one word for it. I can't believe she actually resigned. Patricia doesn't handle losing well. She'll probably try to make trouble somehow, but at least she's not president anymore. You did good, Vincent. Someone needed to stand up to her, and you did. I drove home feeling better than I had in weeks. The fines were rescinded, Patricia was gone, and maybe the neighborhood could get back to normal. I should have known Patricia wouldn't go quietly. Thursday morning, I woke to find my front yard vandalized. Not severely, but enough to be obvious. Someone had spray-painted "Rule Breaker" across my driveway in red paint. They'd also dumped a bag of garbage on my lawn and knocked over my mailbox. I called the police. Officer Chen arrived within 20 minutes, took photos, and filed a report. Do you have any idea who might have done this? I have a pretty good idea. There's an HOA situation. I explained the previous night's meeting and Patricia's dramatic exit. You have proof it was her? No, but the timing is suspicious. Unfortunately, without proof, there's not much we can do except file the report. Do you have security cameras? No, but I'm definitely getting some now. Officer Chen nodded. Good idea. If this happens again and you catch someone on camera, we can press charges. For now, I document everything and maybe check if your neighbors saw anything." After he left, I spent 2 hours scrubbing paint off my driveway with limited success. I'd have to rent a pressure washer. I also called a handyman to fix the mailbox and set up an appointment to have security cameras installed the next week. Carol came over mid-morning with cookies and sympathy. "I saw what happened. This is Patricia, isn't it?" "Probably, but I can't prove it. She's done this before." Not vandalism, but she's vindictive. When her neighbor complained about her constantly calling code enforcement on him, his car got keyed 3 times in 1 month. Did he report it? He did, but nothing came of it. "No proof." Carol hesitated. "Vincent, you should be careful. Patricia has money and connections. Her husband is some big real estate developer. She's used to getting her way." "I'm not backing down, Carol. She can't bully people like this." "I know, just be careful." Over the next week, things escalated in weird little ways. My trash cans were knocked over twice. Someone toilet papered my trees. My morning newspaper kept going missing. Nothing major enough to call the police again, but enough to be annoying and clearly intentional. The security cameras were installed on Tuesday. High definition, night vision, motion activated, covering my entire front yard and driveway. If Patricia or whoever she'd convinced to help her tried anything else, I'd have evidence. Wednesday night, around 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the camera app. I grabbed it and pulled up the live feed. A figure dressed in dark clothing and a baseball cap was walking across my front yard toward the fire hydrant, carrying what looked like a can of spray paint. I didn't think. I just reacted. I pulled on shoes and a jacket and ran outside, my phone in hand still recording. "Hey, what are you doing?" The figure spun around, and even in the dark I recognized her. Patricia Moreland, dressed like a burglar, holding red spray paint. "Stay away from me," she said, her voice high and panicked. "I'm calling the police. You're trespassing. This is community property. I'm inspecting a violation." At 2 in the morning with spray paint. "Yeah, that's real convincing, Patricia." She started backing toward the street. I followed, keeping my distance but making sure the camera caught everything. She stumbled over the curb, caught herself, and speed walked to a car parked 2 houses down. It wasn't her usual silver BMW, it was a beat-up Honda Civic, probably borrowed or rented to avoid recognition. I got the license plate on camera as she sped off, then immediately called the police. Officer Chen arrived again, this time with a partner. I showed them the camera footage, clear video of Patricia on my property with spray paint at 2 in the morning, plus the license plate of the vehicle. "That's pretty damning evidence," Chen said. "We'll follow up with her. This is criminal trespassing at minimum, possibly attempted vandalism. The other incidents you reported might be connected too. Can you actually charge her? We can definitely bring her in for questioning." With this video, we have probable cause. Whether the DA wants to prosecute is another question, but at minimum, we can document this pattern of harassment. Friday afternoon, I got a call from Officer Chen. "Mr. Jenkins, wanted to update you. We brought Patricia Moreland in for questioning yesterday. She denied everything at first, claimed she was just checking on HOA violations, which doesn't hold water at 2 in the morning with spray paint. Her lawyer showed up pretty quick and advised her to stop talking. The DA is reviewing the case, but between your video evidence and the pattern of incidents, they're likely to file charges for criminal trespassing and harassment. What happens next? She'll probably get a court date. Given her record, no priors, she'll likely get a plea deal. Probation, maybe community service, restitution for damages. But the important thing is it'll be on record. If she comes near your property again, it becomes a more serious offense." I thanked him and hung up feeling vindicated but also a little exhausted. This whole situation had spiraled so far beyond a simple HOA dispute. The following week, I received a formal apology letter from the HOA board. Not from Patricia. She'd been officially removed from all board positions, but from Robert Sterling in his new capacity as interim president. The letter acknowledged the invalid fines, apologized for the harassment, and confirmed that all violations against me had been permanently expunged from HOA records. They also included a check reimbursing me for my legal consultation fees and the cost of the security cameras. It was a nice gesture, and it showed the board was serious about fixing Patricia's mess. Carol told me that 13 other homeowners had received similar apologies and refunds. The criminal case against Patricia moved slowly, as these things do. She hired an expensive lawyer who tried to get the charges dropped, arguing that, as former HOA president, she'd been acting in her official capacity. The argument was ridiculous. No HOA president has the authority to trespass on private property at 2 in the morning, but it dragged things out. 2 months later, I got a call from the district attorney's office. Patricia had accepted a plea deal. 2 years probation, 100 hours of community service, a restraining order prohibiting her from coming within 500 feet of my property, and restitution for all damages including my driveway cleaning and mailbox repair. She'd also been permanently banned from serving on the HOA board. She tried to hold out for a better deal, the assistant DA told me, but we had her dead to rights on video. Her lawyer finally convinced her to take the plea. This is about as good an outcome as you could hope for in a case like this. It wasn't jail time, but it was justice. Patricia Moreland, who'd terrorized homeowners with her petty power trips, now had a criminal record and a restraining order. She'd lost her position, her credibility, and her ability to bully people through the HOA. Life in Sagebrush Hills gradually returned to normal. Robert Sterling was elected president in a proper election with actual turnout. Carol told me over 70% of homeowners voted. The new board implemented reforms. All violations had to be approved by a majority vote. Homeowners got formal appeal processes, and the board had to consult with actual lawyers before issuing fines related to city property or easements. The fire hydrant remained clear, occasionally gathering a tumbleweed that I'd remove without complaint. The city sent crews twice a year to inspect and maintain it, just like they were supposed to all along. 6 months after the incident, I was out front watering my actually approved landscape when a car pulled up. A woman in her 30s stepped out, professional attire, friendly smile. "Mr. Jenkins." "Hi, I'm Jennifer Ramirez with the Arizona Homeowner Rights Advocacy Group. I heard about your case with the Sagebrush Hills HOA, and I wanted to talk to you about it if you have a minute." "Sure, what's this about?" "We're a nonprofit that helps homeowners dealing with HOA overreach. Your case is a perfect example of what happens when HOA boards exceed their authority. We're putting together an educational campaign about homeowner rights, and we'd love to feature your story, with your permission." "Feature it how?" "Informational materials, our website, maybe some community presentations. A lot of people don't realize they have rights when it comes to HOAs. They think the board can do whatever they want. Cases like yours show that's not true, and that standing up to improper authority can work." I thought about it. The whole experience had been stressful and time-consuming, but if it could help other people avoid similar situations, maybe it was worth something. "Okay," I said. "What do you need from me?" Over the next few weeks, I worked with Jennifer's organization. They put together a detailed case study about the fire hydrant dispute, explaining the legal issues, the municipal authority versus HOA authority, and the proper steps to take when an HOA oversteps. They also covered Patricia's criminal case as a warning about how personal vendettas could have legal consequences. The case study ended up on their website, in their newsletter, and in presentations to homeowner groups across Arizona. I even got invited to speak at a couple of community meetings, sharing my experience and encouraging people to know their rights. One evening at one of these meetings, a man approached me afterward. "Mr. Jenkins, thank you for sharing your story. I'm dealing with something similar with my HOA. They're trying to fine me for having a disability ramp installed at my front door, saying it violates the architectural standards. But I have medical documentation and state law on my side." "Have you sent them that documentation?" "Multiple times. They ignore it. Don't pay the fine. Get a lawyer if you need to. If state law protects your right to have that ramp, the HOA can't override it. They're betting you'll just give in and pay rather than fight. Don't let them bully you." He shook my hand, looking relieved to know he wasn't alone. That became a common theme. People dealing with HOA problems, feeling powerless, assuming the board could do whatever it wanted. Sharing my experience helped them understand they had options. A year after the initial fire hydrant violation notice, I was sitting on my front porch on a Saturday morning, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when Carol walked over. "You know what I realized yesterday?" she said, settling into the chair next to mine. "This is the first year in 5 that I've actually enjoyed living here. Since Patricia left and Robert took over, it feels like a neighborhood again instead of a police state." "That's good to hear. It's because of what you did, you know, standing up to her. If you just paid the fine and cleared the hydrant without fighting, she'd still be in charge, still terrorizing everyone. Sometimes one person making a stand makes all the difference." I hadn't thought about it that way. I'd been so focused on the principle, on the fact that Patricia was wrong and I was right, that I hadn't considered the broader impact. "I just didn't want to be pushed around," I said, "and that's exactly why it mattered. You know what the best part is? She moved. Patricia moved last month. Sold her house and moved to Scottsdale. Apparently, she couldn't handle living in a neighborhood where everyone knew what she'd done. Good riddance, I say." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching a few neighbors walk by with dogs, a couple of kids riding bikes. Normal neighborhood stuff, the kind of thing that should have been happening all along. The fire hydrant sat at the corner of my property, clearly visible, occasionally checked by city crews, serving its purpose without drama. It was just a fire hydrant again, not a battleground. Sometimes I thought about what would have happened if I just complied with Patricia's original demand. Cleared the area, followed her orders, avoided the whole conflict. Life would have been simpler in the short term. But Patricia would have continued abusing her authority, fining people for invented violations, making everyone miserable. Marcus called me a few weeks later. "Hey, remember when I told you to just clear the hydrant and avoid the fight?" "I remember. I was wrong. You were right to stand up to her. My neighborhood's HOA just tried to pull something similar, fining people for ridiculous stuff, and a bunch of us got together and used your case as an example. Told the board we weren't putting up with it. They backed down immediately. Your story is making the rounds in HOA reform circles. That's kind of surreal. You're like a minor folk hero among people who hate HOA tyranny. Own it, man," I laughed, but there was truth in what he said. The case had resonated with people, because nearly everyone who lived in an HOA community had dealt with some level of overreach or pettiness. Most people just accepted it. I'd gotten lucky, or maybe stubborn, and had the resources and knowledge to fight back. The criminal case's conclusion came 15 months after the initial violation notice. Patricia completed her community service, paid her restitution, and remained on probation. The restraining order stayed in effect. According to Carol's neighborhood gossip network, Patricia's husband had filed for divorce, citing her erratic behavior and legal troubles. Her real estate development business had lost several contracts after the criminal charges became public. It was a harsh fall from grace, but she'd brought it on herself. If she'd just listened when I first explained about the easement, acknowledged the mistake, and rescinded the fine, none of it would have happened. Instead, her ego and need for control had destroyed her reputation and her position. The HOA continued to improve under Robert's leadership. They hired a professional management company to handle day-to-day operations, implemented clear procedures for violations and appeals, and started actually maintaining common areas instead of just harassing homeowners. Property values in the neighborhood increased, and the community felt more like a community again. 2 years after the fire hydrant incident, the HOA asked if I'd be willing to serve on the board. I declined. I'd had enough of HOA politics to last a lifetime, but I appreciated that they asked. Instead, I stayed active in the homeowner advocacy work, helping Jennifer's organization with case consultations and educational materials. The fire hydrant story became something I'd tell at gatherings, usually getting laughs when I described burying it under landscaping out of spite. It was a reminder that sometimes the most ridiculous conflicts teach the most important lessons about standing up for yourself and not letting authority figures, even minor ones, abuse their power. Carol passed away quietly in her sleep one night about 3 years after everything happened. At her funeral, her daughter told me that Carol had spent her last few years much happier, no longer stressed about HOA violations and petty rules. She told her daughter that watching me stand up to Patricia had been one of the highlights of her later years, proof that bullies could be stopped if someone was willing to fight back. That hit me harder than I expected. I'd been focused on the principle, on the legal issues and my rights. But for Carol and probably others, it had been about something more fundamental: dignity and respect, the right to live in your own home without being harassed over nonsense. Years passed. The fire hydrant remained exactly where it always was, occasionally inspected by city crews, occasionally surrounded by tumbleweeds during windy seasons that I'd clear without complaint. It was never an issue again. Sagebrush Hills became one of the better-run HOA communities in Phoenix, used as an example in homeowner advocacy circles of how a community could reform itself after a period of mismanagement. Robert served as president for 5 years before stepping down, succeeded by Susan Chen, one of the board members who'd voted to remove Patricia. The community thrived. I stayed in touch with Jennifer's advocacy group, consulting on cases when homeowners reached out for help. Some situations were similar to mine, HOAs overstepping their legal authority. Others were different: architectural committee rejections, selective enforcement, improper foreclosures. Each case reinforced how important it was for homeowners to understand their rights and not assume the HOA board was always correct. One case particularly stood out. A veteran in Temp was being fined for displaying an American flag that the HOA claimed was too large. Arizona law explicitly protected the right to display flags, but the HOA board either didn't know or didn't care. I connected him with Sarah Chen, the real estate attorney who'd helped me, and she took his case pro bono. The HOA rescinded the fine within a week once they received her letter citing the relevant statutes. These were the small victories that added up, individual homeowners standing up to improper authority, supported by people who'd been through similar situations. It created a network of knowledge and mutual support that made it harder for HOA boards to abuse their power. The anniversary of that first violation notice became something of a joke in my circle of friends. Marcus would text me every year, "Happy Fire Hydrant Day. Buried anything lately?" It was funny because the whole situation had been so absurd, but also meaningful because of what it had led to. 5 years after the incident, I received an invitation to speak at a state legislative hearing about HOA reform. Several bills were being proposed to increase transparency in HOA operations, strengthen homeowner rights, and create better oversight of HOA management companies. My case was cited as an example of why such reforms were needed. I testified for about 10 minutes, walking through the timeline of events and emphasizing the importance of clarity around jurisdictional authority. HOA boards needed to understand what they could and couldn't regulate, and homeowners needed clear avenues for appeal when boards overstepped. Several legislators asked questions. One older representative from Tucson was particularly interested in Patricia's criminal charges. "So she actually got convicted for harassing you over this?" She took a plea deal, but yes. The harassment, trespassing, and attempted vandalism were all documented. The DA felt it warranted prosecution. Do you think that level of personal retaliation is common in HOA disputes? I don't know if it's common, but it's not rare either. When people have a little bit of power and no oversight, some of them abuse it. And when they lose that power, some retaliate. Having clear legal protections and consequences helps prevent that. The reform bills eventually passed in modified form. They didn't solve every HOA problem. No single piece of legislation could, but they created better frameworks for accountability and dispute resolution. It was a small step in the right direction. Life moved forward. I got promoted at work, led some major infrastructure projects, and generally lived the normal life I'd been trying to live before a fire hydrant became the most important thing in my world for a few months. But the experience stayed with me, shaping how I thought about authority, community, and the importance of standing up for what's right even when it's easier to go along. The fire hydrant, for its part, continued being a fire hydrant. It sat on its easement, yellow and utilitarian, available for emergency services if needed, completely unremarkable except for the story attached to it. Sometimes I'd see new neighbors walking by and wonder if they knew the history, if anyone had told them about the HOA president who'd lost her position and gotten a criminal record over that particular piece of city infrastructure. Carol's house sold to a young couple with 2 kids. They were friendly, normal people who kept their yard nice and didn't cause any HOA drama. Sometimes I'd see them outside and think about how Carol would have liked them, would have appreciated having neighbors who just wanted to live their lives without conflict. The last meaningful event in the fire hydrant saga came 6 years after the initial violation notice. I received a letter, handwritten, postmarked from Scottsdale. I almost threw it away without opening it, assuming it was junk mail, but something made me look at the return address. P. Moreland. I stood by my mailbox for a full minute debating whether to read it. Finally, curiosity won. The letter was short, written in neat cursive on expensive stationery. "Mr. Jenkins, I doubt you want to hear from me, and I don't blame you. I'm writing because my therapist suggested I make amends where possible. What I did to you and others in Sagebrush Hills was wrong. I was dealing with personal issues at the time and took them out on the community. I convinced myself I was maintaining standards, But really, I was just trying to control something when my life felt out of control. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did and I'm sorry. I hope you and the neighborhood are doing well. Patricia. I read it twice. It was the last thing I'd expected, a genuine apology from someone who'd made my life hell for months. I didn't know if it was sincere or just part of her therapy homework, but either way, it represented some kind of closure. I didn't respond to the letter. There wasn't really anything to say. But I kept it, filed away with all the other documents from that period, a strange final chapter to a strange story. The fire hydrant remained, a permanent fixture in the landscape of my life and the neighborhood. Every time I passed it, I remembered the lessons learned. Know your rights, stand up to bullies, document everything, and never assume authority figures are always right just because they have titles. Those lessons served me well beyond just HOA disputes. In work situations, in personal conflicts, in community involvement, the core principle remained the same. Question improper authority, stand on solid ground, and don't back down when you're right. And if someone demands, you clear their fire hydrant when it's not your responsibility. Sometimes the right response is to bury it deeper, not forever, but long enough to make the point that you won't be pushed around. Just make sure you have documentation, good legal advice, and security cameras before you do. The story of the fire hydrant and the HOA president who lost everything over it became local legend, told and retold in neighborhood meetings, HOA reform groups, and homeowner advocacy circles. It was a cautionary tale about the abuse of power, the importance of knowing your rights, and the unexpected consequences of taking on fights you think you'll win. For me, it remained a reminder that sometimes the smallest conflicts teach the biggest lessons, and that standing up for yourself, even over something as mundane as a fire hydrant, can ripple outward in ways you never expect, changing not just your situation but helping others find the courage to stand up for themselves too. The fire hydrant stood sentinel at the corner of my property, a yellow monument to the absurdity of petty tyranny and the power of principled resistance. It was just a fire hydrant, but for a while, it had been so much more, the line in the sand where I'd decided enough was enough. And in the end, that decision had mattered, not just for me, but for everyone in Sagebrush Hills who'd been suffering under Patricia's regime, and for countless others across Arizona who'd heard the story and found inspiration to fight their own battles against HOA overreach. The fire hydrant remained, clear and accessible, exactly as it should be, serving its intended purpose without drama or conflict. Sometimes the simplest outcomes are the best ones, and after years of complications, having a fire hydrant that was just a fire hydrant felt like victory enough.